Shaq walked into the most exclusive spa in the city, expecting luxury. Instead, a voice dripping with arrogance sliced through the air. "I don't care who he is. Get him out." The entire room froze. Expensive champagne hung midair. Eyes darted toward Madeline Hartley, the spa's self-proclaimed queen. She smirked from her velvet lounge chair, flicking her sunglasses down. The receptionist hesitated. "Sir, your reservation. It's been canceled." Shaq raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? By who?" Madeline leaned forward. "By me." She had no idea who she had just messed with and what Shaq did next. "All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from." Shaquille O'Neal stepped through the glass doors of Elysium Spa, his massive frame nearly eclipsing the sleek, gold-accented entrance. The scent of lavender and eucalyptus lingered in the air, and a soft instrumental melody floated through the pristine lobby. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Every head turned. A few guests exchanged looks over their champagne flutes. Others pretended not to stare, their curiosity barely masked by polite disinterest. Seated on a plush, white chaise, Madeline Hartley barely spared Shaq a glance before removing her oversized sunglasses with an exaggerated sigh. Dressed in a flowing silk robe, her blonde hair twisted into a meticulous chignon, she looked every bit the self-proclaimed Queen of Elysium. And then, in a voice as sharp as glass, she cut through the silence. "I don't care who he is. Get him out." The young receptionist at the front desk flinched, her fingers frozen over the keyboard. She looked up at Shaq, then back at Madeline, torn between customer service training and the undeniable weight of the moment. "Excuse me?" Shaq's deep voice carried effortlessly across the room, his brows raised, more amused than offended. For now. Madeline finally turned her gaze to him fully, taking her time as if assessing a piece of furniture that had been misplaced in a high-end boutique. "This is a private spa," she said, her manicured fingers brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. "And we have standards." A hush swept over the lobby. The tension thickened. Shaq remained unbothered. He stepped forward, resting his massive hands on the marble counter, his fingers tapping lazily against the polished surface. The receptionist swallowed hard. "I've got a reservation," Shaq said smoothly, flashing a grin. "Pretty sure that means I belong here." The receptionist glanced at her screen, clicked a few times and hesitated. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, she murmured, "Sir, your reservation, it's been canceled." Shaq's expression didn't change, but there was a shift in his posture, a subtle straightening of his shoulders, the amusement in his eyes cooling just slightly. "Canceled," he repeated slowly. "By who?" Madeline crossed one leg over the other, a satisfied smirk curling her lips. "By me." Gasps rippled through the room. A few guests exchanged scandalized glances, while others leaned forward, eager to witness what would happen next. Shaq tilted his head, the hint of a grin playing at the corner of his mouth. He placed both hands on the counter and leaned in ever so slightly, his towering presence casting a shadow over the reception desk. "Oh yeah." His voice dropped an octave, smooth and calm, but carrying an unmistakable edge. Madeline for the first time faltered. The air crackled. The receptionist held her breath. The auctioneer tapped his mic. "Bidding starts at $2 million. Shaq locked eyes with her. This was about to get very interesting. Laughter rippled through the spa lounge, hushed but unmistakable. Eyes flicked between Shaq and Madeline, the tension thickening with every second. Madeline didn't just want to reject him. She wanted to humiliate him. Lifting her chin, she raised her voice so the entire room could hear. "This is a private club," she announced, her tone dripping with condescension. "And we have standards." A group of women perched on a velvet chaise exchanged amused looks, giggling behind their champagne glasses. One of them whispered something, and another stifled a laugh. Shaq's easygoing smirk faded just a fraction. His gaze, steady and unreadable, locked onto Madeline's. "You mean money?" His voice was calm, controlled. "'Cause I got plenty of that." Madeline's lips curled in a smirk. "Oh, sweetheart," she purred, tilting her head as if he were a child who just said something amusing. "It's not just about money. It's about class." Shaq leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose. "Class, huh?" He let the words settle in the air, studying her. The whispers grew louder. A few guests were still snickering, but others shifted uncomfortably, sensing the shift in the room. Madeline basked in the attention, flipping her hair over her shoulder. Some places just aren't for everyone, she added with a dismissive shrug. Shaq let the silence stretch. Then slowly he pulled his phone from his pocket, tilting it just enough for the camera lens to catch her face. Let's see how classy you are when this goes viral. Madeline's smirk twitched. The air went still. Across the room, someone gasped. The mood of the room had changed entirely. What was once an amusing spectacle had now turned into something else. The realization dawned on Madeline's face a half-second too late. Shaquille O'Neal wasn't just a man. He was a brand, a global figure, with millions watching his every move. And now, they'd be watching her too. The guests leaned in, phones slipping from purses. Madeline's eyes darted to the camera, panic flickering in them for the first time. Gasps rippled through the spa lounge the moment Shaq raised his phone. The sleek camera lens caught the golden glow of chandeliers, the opulence of velvet chaise lounges, and most importantly, the smug face of Madeline Hartley. She scoffed, utterly unfazed. "Go ahead," she drawled, crossing her arms. "No one's gonna care." Shaq's lips curled into a slow, knowing grin. "Oh, they'll care," he said smoothly. "My 30 million followers love this kind of thing." A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Several guests stiffened, suddenly less amused. A man in a designer robe suddenly pulled his sunglasses down, eyes flicking toward the phone screen. Even the receptionist, a nervous-looking young woman, visibly swallowed. Her fingers fidgeted against the desk, as if debating whether she should step in. Madeline, however, held her ground. "You think your little basketball fans give a damn about an exclusive spa?" she scoffed. Shaq chuckled, shifting his phone slightly to make sure the camera had a perfect angle of her. "They don't need to care," he said, his deep voice calm. "But social media does. And trust me, sweetheart, you don't want to be that trending topic." A woman in the back let out an audible oof, and the air in the room shifted. Madeline's face twitched. For the first time, she hesitated. Someone near the juice bar coughed. Another guest casually, too casually, angled their phone up, as if considering recording as well. Shaq's grin widened. He'd seen it before. The exact moment a bully realized they weren't the one holding the power anymore. Madeline lifted her chin. "This is ridiculous." "You're not scaring me." Shaq shrugged. "Cool," he said. "Then just say what you said before." Into the camera. He extended the phone slightly toward her. Madeline's mouth opened, then closed. More whispers. A waiter pretending to straighten a fruit tray was definitely eavesdropping. The pressure was building. Shaq tapped the phone screen, checking his live stream. "Huh. Already 12,000 people watching." He tilted his head. "Oh, 15,000 now." A spa guest in a silk robe gasped. "He's streaming?" Madeline froze. Then snap. She lunged for a towel from a nearby spa worker and hurled it at the camera. "Turn that off!" The towel hit Shaq's phone, knocking it sideways. Gasps filled the room. But Shaq, he just chuckled, steadying his grip. The video was still rolling. The tension in the spa was thick enough to cut with a knife. Shaq stood tall, his towering frame casting a shadow over the reception desk. He kept his phone steady, still live streaming as the comments and reactions poured in. The elegant chandeliers overhead reflected off the marble floors, but no amount of luxury could distract from what was happening. Madeline's face twisted with frustration. Her polished, rehearsed elegance was slipping fast. "Enough of this nonsense," she snapped, her voice cutting through the hushed murmurs of the guests. "You're embarrassing yourself." Shaq arched an eyebrow. "Me? Oh no, sweetheart. This is your show." He turned his phone slightly, making sure she was in full view of his millions of followers. "You're the one throwing tantrums." A nervous chuckle rippled through the room. A woman in a silk robe leaned to whisper to her friend. "She's unraveling." Another guest, a man who had once been smirking at Shaq's presence, now looked deeply uncomfortable. Madeline's sharp nails tapped against the marble counter. "Fine," she huffed, lifting her chin. "If you want to act like some influencer, go ahead. But I have actual business to tend to." She turned sharply to the receptionist, her expression cold. "Escort him out. Now." The young receptionist, caught between fear and disbelief, hesitated. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, eyes darting between Madeline and Shaq. "Ma'am, do it," Madeline snapped. Shaq exhaled, shaking his head. "See, I was hoping you'd calm down." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Guess we gotta do this the hard way." Madeline rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, please, Who are you calling your little basketball buddies? Gonna have them dribble me out of here? Shaq chuckled, the sound deep and rich. Nah. He pressed a button and put the phone to his ear. Just the guy who owns this place. The entire spa went silent. Madeline blinked. What? The receptionist turned ghostly white. A man sipping green juice choked mid-sip. Shaq strolled a few steps away, casually pacing as the phone rang. Yeah, I need a favor, he said smoothly, his deep voice carrying through the luxurious space. Madeline's laugh was high-pitched, forced. You're bluffing. Shaq didn't respond. He just tapped his fingers on the countertop, waiting. And then, a deep, authoritative voice crackled through the speaker. Shaq, what's up, big man? You at my spa? Shaq smirked, pulling the phone away from his ear just enough for the entire room to hear. Gasps echoed across the spa. The atmosphere shifted. Madeline's lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, her confidence shattered. She had just realized this fight wasn't one she could win. The tension in the room was electric. Every guest, every staff member, every set of eyes in the spa was locked onto Shaq and Madeline. The receptionist, still frozen, glanced between her computer screen and the imposing figure in front of her. Madeline, on the other hand, stood firm, arms crossed, chin lifted like a queen refusing to acknowledge a threat. But there was a flicker, just for a second, a crack in her confidence. Shaq, ever the master of timing, leaned against the marble counter and tilted his head. You sure you want to double down on this? Madeline scoffed, though her voice wasn't quite as sharp as before. I don't care who you called. This is a private establishment, and I have every right to decide who belongs here. Shaq chuckled, deep and slow. Yeah? You might want to care. And then, a shrill ring shattered the thick silence. The receptionist's phone lit up, and all the color drained from her face. She stared at the screen like it was a time bomb about to explode. Answer it, Shaq said casually, but there was a weight behind his words, a quiet authority that made even the wealthiest guests hesitate. The receptionist swallowed hard and hesitantly picked up the phone. Elysium Spa, how can I? A booming voice erupted from the receiver, loud enough for those nearest to hear. Put me on speaker. The receptionist fumbled to hit the button. The second the line went live, a deep, commanding voice filled the spa. This is Martin Hastings. Who the hell thought it was a good idea to cancel Shaquille O'Neal's reservation? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Madeline's mouth fell open slightly before she quickly snapped it shut, forcing herself to stay composed. Mr. Hastings, I can explain. I didn't ask for explanations. Martin cut her off. I asked who did it. The receptionist, still looking ready to pass out, barely managed to whisper, It was Ms. Hartley, sir. All eyes snapped to Madeline. I see, Martin said, his tone dangerously calm. Ms. Hartley, you've got about 10 seconds to tell me exactly what you were thinking. Madeline's throat bobbed as she tried to find her words, but for the first time that night, she had nothing to say. The air in the spa had shifted. The once giggling guests were now whispering, eyes darting between Shaq and Madeline like spectators at a high-stakes game. The receptionist, visibly shaken, clutched the ringing phone, her fingers trembling as she glanced between Madeline and the 7-foot legend standing in front of her. She hesitated before answering. Yes, sir. He's here. No, I didn't cancel it, but... Her voice faltered as she listened to the man on the other end. She gulped. Understood, sir. Shaq folded his arms, watching the receptionist with mild amusement as she slowly lowered the phone and turned toward him. Her lips parted as if she were about to deliver a death sentence. Mr. O'Neal, she said carefully, forcing a nervous smile, your reservation is completely valid. There was a misunderstanding. Shaq didn't move. He just raised an eyebrow. But Madeline wasn't having it. She stepped forward, flipping her blonde hair over her shoulder with a huff. Absolutely not. I don't care who he called. She turned toward the receptionist with a look of pure entitlement. Do not let him in. I won't allow it. The receptionist winced. Mrs. Hartley, Madeline shot her a glare so sharp it could slice glass. You will listen to me. Shaq chuckled, low and deep. Oh, sweetheart, he said, tilting his head. That's not your call to make. The crowd collectively inhaled. Someone in the back murmured, Oh, she's done for. Madeline turned back to him, nostrils flaring. Excuse me? Shaq smiled, slow and confident. I don't think you understand how this works. See, you're just a guest. I'm the guest. He took a step closer, voice calm but firm. And last time I checked, you don't own this place. The receptionist shuffled nervously, gripping her clipboard. Sir, she whispered, barely audible. Shaq glanced at her. What's up? The receptionist swallowed hard, looking like she was about to faint. The owner is on his way. The room went dead silent. Madeline's lips twitched. Excuse me? Shaq leaned back. You heard her. Madeline's confident posture faltered, but she recovered quickly. She scoffed and waved a dismissive hand. Oh, please, Martin Hastings isn't coming here over something like this. I know him. Shaq smirked. Guess we're about to find out. As if on cue, the glass doors at the entrance swung open. A sleek, black luxury car had just pulled up outside, and stepping out was a tall, silver-haired man in a navy blue suit. His steps were quick, purposeful. His expression? Pure anger. Martin Hastings, the billionaire, owner of Elysium Spa. The moment he stepped inside, the entire staff stiffened. The chatter in the room ceased. Even the ice cubes in people's glasses seemed to stop clinking. Where? Martin growled, scanning the room. Is Shaquille O'Neal? The receptionist's hand shot up. Here, sir. She gestured towards Shaq like she was presenting a king. Martin's eyes landed on him, and immediately his expression changed. His irritation melted away, replaced by something that looked almost apologetic. Shaq, my friend, he exclaimed, striding forward with his arms outstretched. What the hell is going on here? Shaq shook his hand, keeping his eyes locked on Madeline, who had gone disturbingly pale. Oh, I don't know, Shaq said casually. I just came to relax. But apparently I don't meet the standards of some people. Martin's brow furrowed. What? He turned to the receptionist. Clarify. The poor woman looked like she wanted to disappear. Mr. Hastings, I didn't do anything. Mrs. Hartley said to cancel his reservation and Madeline snapped out of her frozen state. This is absurd, she barked. I was just looking out for the spa. Do you know what kind of clientele we have here? The status of this place? Martin's gaze turned ice cold. Oh, I do, he said. And I can tell you right now, you're no longer part of it. The guest gasped. A woman actually choked on her mimosa. Madeline stumbled back. Wait, what? Martin crossed his arms. I don't tolerate racism in my establishment. Madeline's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That's not... Martin turned to the receptionist. Effective immediately, Shaquille O'Neal is to receive the ultimate VIP treatment on the house. The room erupted into whispers. Some clapped. Others just stared. Madeline took another step back. You can't do this. Martin gave her a deadpan look. I own this place. I can do whatever I want. The color drained completely from Madeline's face. She was finished. Shaq chuckled, stepping past her. Guess your standards weren't high enough. The guest gawked as Madeline stood frozen. But she wasn't done yet. Her hands clenched into fists. This wasn't over. The low hum of conversation died the moment the sleek, black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the entrance of Elysium Spa. A chauffeur rushed to open the door, and out stepped Martin Hastings, the billionaire owner himself. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, his expression was unreadable behind his designer sunglasses. But the way he moved, the sharp, purposeful stride, the squared shoulders, sent a message before he even spoke. The guests inside stiffened, watching as he stormed through the glass doors like a king entering his court. The real power in the room had arrived. The receptionist nearly dropped her tablet as she stumbled to greet him. Mr. Hastings, He didn't slow down. Where, he demanded, voice like steel, is Shaquille O'Neal? The crowd parted, and there was Shaq, standing tall, arms folded, waiting. Madeline, who had been attempting to slink into the background, tensed. Her face, once smug and full of condescension, lost all color. She hadn't expected him. Martin's eyes locked onto Shaq's, and instantly his demeanor changed. The tension in his face softened, his brows lifting in recognition. My friend, he called out, striding forward with open arms. What the hell is going on here? Shaq clasped his hand, shaking it firmly. Man, you tell me. He jerked a thumb toward Madeline. I had a reservation. Apparently she decided that didn't matter. Martin's sharp gaze snapped to Madeline like a whip. She flinched. The room was dead silent. Even the air seemed to still. Madeline tried to recover, straightening her posture. Mr. Hastings, I was just looking out for the integrity of the spa. she said, her voice sickly sweet. I assumed there was a mistake in the reservation system. You understand, don't you? Martin's expression didn't change. He turned to the receptionist. Did she cancel the reservation? The receptionist hesitated, but one look at Martin's face made her spill everything. Yes, sir. Mrs. Hartley told me to cancel it as soon as he walked in. Martin exhaled sharply through his nose, shaking his head. Then in a voice low and dangerously calm, he said, Madeline. She swallowed. Yes? Did you really just tell one of the most generous, respected men I know that he isn't welcome here? Madeline opened her mouth, floundering. I was just trying to maintain the standards of Elysium. Martin took off his sunglasses. His eyes, usually cool and unreadable, burned with disgust. The only thing ruining the standards here, Madeline, is you. A wave of whispers rippled through the room. A woman in the back gasped. Someone else snickered. Madeline froze. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. Martin turned to the receptionist. Effective immediately, Shaquille O'Neal will receive the highest level of VIP treatment on the house. Shaq chuckled. That's real generous of you, Martin. But Madeline wasn't done yet. Her fingers curled into fists. She took a slow, shaky breath, eyes darting between Shaq and Martin. This wasn't over. Madeline gritted her teeth, fury bubbling beneath the surface. And then, she did something no one expected. The moment Martin Hastings pressed play on Shaq's phone, the entire spa felt like it had been put on trial. The video was damning. There was Madeline, standing tall, her voice dripping with disdain as she declared Shaq didn't belong. There was the receptionist, visibly uncomfortable, stammering excuses. And then there was her final smug declaration, I don't care who you are. Get out. Martin's jaw tightened as the clip ended. A long, heavy silence filled the room. Madeline shifted, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping her designer clutch like a lifeline. Mr. Hastings, Martin snapped his gaze to her, his voice sharp. You mean to tell me that you canceled Shaquille O'Neal's reservation? She faltered, but then forced a nervous laugh. I was just keeping the standards high. Shaq, who had been leaning against the counter like he had all the time in the world, straightened up slightly. His deep voice rumbled, dripping with amusement. Yeah? He folded his massive arms. Let's see how high those standards stay after today. The implication sent a ripple of unease through the guests. Some checked their phones. Was this already online? The staff exchanged worried glances. Madeline's confidence cracked. She cleared her throat, trying to regain control. Look, I didn't mean... Martin cut her off with a raised hand. He turned to the receptionist, his expression stone cold. Give Mr. O'Neal the ultimate VIP package. On the house. A collective gasp echoed through the lobby. The receptionist fumbled with the tablet, nodding rapidly. Oh, of course! Right away, sir. Madeline lost it. You can't be serious, she shrieked. You're just giving it to him? That's a $50,000 package. Martin didn't even look at her. That's right. Shaq chuckled, adjusting his jacket. Now that's what I call high standards. Madeline's lips trembled. She was losing, in front of everyone. Her face burned with rage and humiliation. This wasn't over. Her breathing grew shallow. And then, in a last-ditch effort to save face, Madeline did something reckless. A stunned silence hung in the air. Madeline Hartley's chest rose and fell rapidly, her manicured fingers trembling as she gripped the stem of a crystal champagne flute. Her pristine, carefully curated world was crumbling right in front of her, and she couldn't handle it. You can't do this, she shrieked, voice cracking as she pointed at Shaq. He doesn't belong here. The room collectively inhaled. Martin Hastings turned his gaze to her, slow and deliberate. His expression was stone cold, his patience officially gone. I don't remember you owning this place, he said, voice calm but carrying a dangerous weight. Madeline's nostrils flared. Her perfect, composed persona was disintegrating in front of an audience that once admired her. The same people who used to hang on to her every word were now whispering, some in amusement, others in disbelief. She felt it slipping. Her status, her control, her power. She wouldn't let this happen. Her fingers clenched around the champagne flute. Martin had dismissed her. Shaq had humiliated her. The crowd had laughed at her. The rage overtook her. In a blinding flash of fury, she hurled the champagne glass, her last desperate attempt to seize control of the moment. The crystal sliced through the air. the stem catching the light before it shattered just inches from Martin Hastings' feet. The entire spa gasped in unison. A horrific silence followed. Even Madeline seemed shocked by what she had done. Her fingers hovered in the air, as if she could somehow take it back. Martin exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. Shaq let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "Now you've lost it." Madeline's face twitched. I didn't mean." "You absolutely meant to," Martin cut in, his voice deadly cold. The spa guests started whispering again, some stepping back, unsure if this was about to escalate even further. A spa employee rushed forward with a broom, eyes wide with panic. Security stepped closer. For the first time in her privileged life, Madeline looked genuinely afraid. And then, her phone buzzed. Her hands shook as she lifted it, the screen flashing with dozens of notifications. The first message hit her like a slap to the face. Trending, Madeline meltdown. She froze. The next message was worse. Your partnership deal has been terminated. Her breath hitched. Then another. We regret to inform you that your membership has been revoked. She staggered backward. This wasn't just embarrassing. This was career-ending. Martin crossed his arms. All right, that's it. You're done. A heavy silence settled over the room. Madeline's confidence cracked. She cleared her throat, trying to regain control. Look, I didn't mean... Martin cut her off with a raised hand. He turned to the receptionist, his expression stone cold. Give Mr. O'Neill the ultimate VIP package. On the house. A collective gasp echoed through the lobby. The receptionist fumbled with the tablet, nodding rapidly. Oh, of course. Right away, sir. Madeline lost it. You can't be serious, she shrieked. You're just giving it to him? That's a $50,000 package. Martin didn't even look at her. That's right, Shaq chuckled, adjusting his jacket. Now that's what I call high standards. Madeline's lips trembled. She was losing, in front of everyone. Her face burned with rage and humiliation. This wasn't over. Her breathing grew shallow. And then, in a last-ditch effort to save face, Madeline did something reckless. A stunned silence hung in the air. Madeline Hartley's chest rose and fell rapidly, her manicured fingers trembling as she gripped the stem of a crystal champagne flute. Her pristine, carefully curated world was crumbling right in front of her, and she couldn't handle it. You can't do this, she shrieked, voice cracking as she pointed at Shaq. He doesn't belong here. The room collectively inhaled. Martin Hastings turned his gaze to her, slow and deliberate. His expression was stone cold, his patience officially gone. I don't remember you owning this place, he said, voice calm but carrying a dangerous weight. Madeline's nostrils flared. Her perfect composed persona was disintegrating in front of an audience that once admired her. The same people who used to hang on to her every word were now whispering, some in amusement, others in disbelief. She felt it slipping, her status, her control, her power. She wouldn't let this happen. Her fingers clenched around the champagne flute. Martin had dismissed her. Shaq had humiliated her. The crowd had laughed at her. The rage overtook her. In a blinding flash of fury, she hurled the champagne glass, her last desperate attempt to seize control of the moment. The crystal sliced through the air, the stem catching the light, before it shattered just inches from Martin Hastings' feet. The entire spa gasped in unison. A horrific silence followed. Even Madeline seemed shocked by what she had done. Her fingers hovered in the air, as if she could somehow take it back. Martin exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. Shaq let out a low whistle, shaking his head. Now you've lost it. Madeline's face twitched. I didn't mean... You absolutely meant to, Martin cut in, his voice deadly cold. The spa guests started whispering again, some stepping back, unsure if this was about to escalate even further. A spa employee rushed forward with a broom, eyes wide with panic. Security stepped closer. For the first time in her privileged life, Madeline looked genuinely afraid. And then, her phone buzzed. Her hands shook as she lifted it, the screen flashing with dozens of notifications. The first message hit her like a slap to the face. Trending, Madeline meltdown. She froze. The next message was worse. Your partnership deal has been terminated. Her breath hitched. Then another. We regret to inform you that your membership has been revoked. She staggered backward. This wasn't just embarrassing. This was career-ending. Martin crossed his arms. All right, that's it. You're done. A heavy silence settled over the room. Madeline's breath was ragged, her eyes darting between the shattered glass at Martin's feet and the dozens of eyes watching her unravel. The spa, once her playground, where she commanded attention, she dictated the rules, was now a stage for her public downfall. She forced a smile, straightening her dress. "Martin, darling," she cooed, though her voice wavered. "This is all just a misunderstanding." Martin didn't blink. "A misunderstanding?" His voice was eerily calm, but the weight of it sent a chill through the air. "You humiliated my guest. You tried to bar him from this establishment. And then," he gestured at the shattered glass, "you lost control in front of an entire room of people." Madeline swallowed hard. I was just, that's it." Martin's voice was final, a judge delivering a verdict that had already been sealed. "I've had enough of you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Madeline flinched. "Wait, what? What are you saying?" Martin's gaze hardened. "You're done here, Madeline." Her composure cracked. "Done?" He turned to the security team standing near the entrance. "Escort her out and cancel her membership." His next words rang through the spa like a gavel slamming down in a courtroom. "Permanently." The air thickened. Madeline's face drained of color. "No!" Security moved in. Her voice sharpened into a hysterical shriek. "You can't do this to me. I own this place. I—" Martin raised a bored eyebrow. "No, Madeline, I own this place." The security guards reached her, gripping her arms firmly but without force. Yet she thrashed as if they had tackled her. "Don't you dare touch me," she screeched, trying to pull free. The watching guests whispered in disbelief, some recording, others relishing in the downfall of a woman who had spent years lording her power over them. Shaq crossed his arms, a slow smirk spreading across his face. "I thought this place was all about class?" Madeline whirled on him, eyes blazing. "You! This is all your fault. You don't belong here. You never did." Martin sighed. "And now, neither do you." The security team hauled her toward the doors. She kicked. She screamed. She begged. "Please, I built my entire reputation here. I'll do anything. Just don't." Martin's face was stone cold. "Out!" As the doors swung open, the roaring flash of cameras exploded outside. Madeline froze, eyes wild, because the press had just caught everything. The silence in the spa felt thick, like the calm before a storm. The last echoes of Madeline's furious screams had barely faded, and yet the energy in the room hadn't settled. Shaq stood casually, hands in his pockets, watching as Martin Hastings, the billionaire owner of Elysium Spa, tried to process what had just happened. Shaq's voice broke the tension. "I appreciate you stepping in, but I don't think this spa deserves me." Martin's forehead creased. "What do you mean?" Shaq looked around. The polished marble floors, the gold-plated nameplates, the overpriced scented candles, all designed to exclude rather than welcome. He'd been to plenty of elite places before. But this one? This one had bad energy. He turned back to Martin, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "How much you want for this place?" The entire room stiffened. Guests exchanged glances. Some looked intrigued. Others, terrified. "Excuse me?" Martin asked, blinking. Shaq shrugged, unbothered. "I'm saying, what's the price tag on this little country club you call a spa?" The whispers started immediately. "He wants to buy it? Is this real?" A waiter nearly dropped a tray of champagne glasses. "You want to buy Elysium Spa?" Martin asked again, as if he hadn't heard right the first time. Shaq chuckled. "Yeah, I think it could use some new management." Martin's lips parted, but no words came out. The billionaire was rarely caught off guard. But this was unreal. The guests waited, breathless, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. The air outside the spa was crisp, the city humming in the background. A crowd had gathered, staff, media, and curious onlookers, all watching as the final piece of Shaq's plan fell into place. A cherry-red velvet curtain hung over the spa's newly installed sign. The employees stood in a neat row, waiting, their expressions shifting between excitement and disbelief. Shaq stood front and center, dressed in a sharp navy suit, his hands clasped in front of him. His presence alone was commanding, but today, he wasn't just a guest. He was the owner. Across the street, Madeline Hartley stood frozen, gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her world had been flipped upside down in a matter of days. 2 weeks ago, she had been untouchable. Elysium Spa's queen bee, the gatekeeper of exclusivity. Now, she had no power here. She barely recognized the place. The cold marble entrance had been redesigned, softened with warm wood paneling and gold accents. Gone were the pretentious velvet ropes. Instead, an open-door policy sign stood tall, welcoming everyone. Shaq turned toward the crowd, a knowing smile tugging at his lips. He could feel Madeline's furious glare from behind him, but he didn't turn. He didn't need to. A spa employee stepped forward, handing him a gold-plated pair of scissors. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder. "All right, people," Shaq said, his deep voice carrying over the buzz of excitement. "Let's make this official." With one precise cut, the ribbon fell. The crowd erupted into applause, the media cameras flashing wildly. Then with a single pull, the red curtain dropped, revealing the brand new sign. The words seemed to glow in the sunlight, each letter a direct slap in the face to the elitism that had once ruled here. The energy in the air was electric. For the employees, it was relief. For the community, it was justice. But for Madeline, it was the ultimate humiliation. Her once pristine designer coat was slightly wrinkled, her heels scuffed from pacing outside. She looked out of place, a fallen ruler watching her kingdom crumble. Shaq finally turned, catching her eye. She flinched but then lifted her chin, forcing a tight, bitter smile. "Enjoy it while it lasts," she said coolly. Shaq took a step toward her, his massive frame casting a shadow over her smaller one. "Oh, sweetheart." He let the words draw out, savoring the moment. "It's gonna last a long time." He glanced back at the grand entrance, then smirked. "Guess I set the standards now." Madeline's expression twisted in frustration. With one last huff, she spun on her heel and stormed off, disappearing into the city. Shaq? He simply adjusted his cufflinks, took a deep breath, and walked through the doors of his new spa, ready to welcome everyone.